actually rely on them to supply the seed to us in those circumstances so that we're not endangering any, native population that they would be working on. A lot of times we'll be going out on sites that are privately held, that are public right of way. I mean, I've stood in so many ditches knee deep in water collecting seed, I can't tell you. But we would prefer to actually grow our own stock and seed, and collect that seed. So usually the material that we're working with now is all second generation material that we actually have on our own property. Our oak trees are now large enough to produce mast years that we're able to sweep up our own acorns, throw down tarps, pick things, and then start the processing for the following year. And that all starts in August. And when we're doing that, we have shortfalls. And when you're collecting seed, the the goal is to make sure that you make your number, in and when I say make your number, we measure that actually in flats. So we know how many plants a particular plant, how many plants seed from a particular plant will produce given a flat size that we have. And we have custom flats that we make out of cedar that are grow through. So we have, it's an air prune system, but we know that that plant or that flat will produce this many plants. And, uh-oh. Yeah.
You having trouble advancing the slide?
Yes, I am. Oh, there we go. And now I've lost my train of thought. My apologies, everybody. But when we're out and doing this collecting, we get to see a lot of nature. And so we get to, it kind of expands our understanding of how these plants perform in their natural environment. And when you have that kind of understanding and we're able to pass it along to our customers, it makes a big deal in that plant's performance for our customers. So if we know about your site and we know about where we collected this material, the interaction that our customers have with that material is much more positive. And being a botanist, frankly, I spend most of my time, for botanizing anyway, sitting down and identifying plants in the field and making sure that we collect the proper ones and that we put that out for sale in an appropriate way. But when we are seed collecting, it's not pretty, it's not glamorous. You get really dirty, you get stuff everywhere, and you're dealing with seed on very different levels. So what you see here are some of the seeds that we collect and how we collect them. Like on the upper right, that's Quercus macrocarpa or bur oak. And that's an easy one. Usually we have some customers that have big patios, giant bur oak. We just take a broom, we go over to their patio and clean it for them. And that's all the seed we're ever going to need, because you're talking about thousands and thousands of acorns, and we collect it in a garbage can. Harder plants to collect, your bottom right-hand corner here, that's blueberry. And the reason why that's a circle is I had to take that with a microscope, and that seed is smaller than a grain of sand. Much, much, much smaller than a grain of sand. So when you're trying to actually see what the viability of a plant is, you end up having to do these things you never thought you'd have to do as a nursery person, is throwing it under the scope, cutting it open, making sure that everything is proper and in place, and then making sure it gets into the propagation in an appropriate way. And then on your right, that's American plum, makes really good ice cream, by the way. And that one's much more difficult than these other two, even though, you have the large fruit of the acorn, which, relatively easy. It looks like it's comparable, but American plum is as mean a plant as you'll ever come across. You walk into it, it'll rip your clothes off and then put a hole in your arm. It has a modified stem that if you're not aware of it and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go over there and collect that, it can really rip you to pieces. Now, I do recommend planting it in yards and everything like that. It is safe, but it is also one of those things that culturally and as its habit, you need to be aware of what it is and how it grows. A lot of people don't have that cultural information when it comes to natives. And when you're out collecting the seed, and as a native grower, we find that having that is and passing that along to our customers, and then they can adjust how they use it in their yard is very beneficial. From the seed collection, we kind of we grow them. Not put a finer point on it. The and what you see here in front of you on the left, I don't know if it's on your left or right, but on the left, the up and down picture, that is gray dogwood, Cornus racemosa, and on the right is Hydrangea arborescens. These are two shrubs. As tree keepers, I know maybe not all that interesting, but the interest in something like this is that structurally they represent two very different kind of ends of the spectrum on how we're able to propagate things. In our greenhouses, we use a seed tray, as you can see here in the upper right, in which we put the seed in from August to November, and then we overwinter it as close to natural processes as we can, so that when we put it out the following year, when we bring them into the greenhouses, usually in March, excuse me, that the plants have had their cold stratification, they've gone through freezing and thawing, that they were secure, that rodents didn't get into them. That's why you can see the hardware wire on the bottom, and that that the germination process happens appropriately per species. And some of them come on very, very early and others do not. From that seed, it's so weird not actually standing up in front of it, being able to point at it. From that seed tray, it goes into our plug trays. You can see it down beneath that. That's the root maker trays that we use. And the reason, what's that? Oh, I had some echo. My apologies. And from there, we go down to that root maker tray, and that generates the fibrous root system that we find helps produce a pretty superior seedling to your standard grow tube. We've used GT38s. We've used smooth-sided. When we first started, we used the empty milk cartons. And I got to tell you, as a 9-year-old, spending your Saturdays unfolding and folding milk cartons into squares and fitting them into flats is, well, it's very, very thrilling. Haunts my dreams, actually. And then on the left, that's when that's more of our perennial growth, but that's how packed our greenhouses normally are. So when you have the step process, you take it from your germination tray, which the root penetrates down through the hardware wire and into open air, which kills the tip. And within 2 inches of that, it'll start to regrow more roots. Then when we transplant it into that root maker pot, you can see the holes and everything like that. It further branches and kills tips, and then they regrow more. And it really produces the root system that we're looking for. So when you're doing your propagation, it's very delicate work. You have to be very gentle, taking them out of that flat and getting them in there. And so when that transfer occurs, it takes about a week to 2 weeks for that plant to coalesce, get itself back in order, and start growing again. So frankly, it's been getting shorter. We've kind of been figuring some things out. We use a mix. It's not proprietary, but it is a little different than a lot of grower mixes. It's pine fines, perlite, peat, and we use a fairly hot mix. We use a 3:1:2 ratio on our fertilizers, and it really produces some pretty spectacular roots. And once it comes out of the greenhouses, it produces roots like what you see here on the right. Now, this oak in this picture is, it was a seed in February, and that picture was taken the 1st of August. So that plant is, what is that, 7 months? But from start to finish, it's exactly 1 year. Well, excuse me, it's 11 months from collection. So that's the kind of growth that we expect by the end of the season in August. And part of what it is that once that seed is germinated, we start selecting immediately. If the plant doesn't look right, if there's a deformation that we cannot correct, that when we move it from that germination tray into our plug cells, if it cannot be corrected, it does not make the cut to the next stage of our production. And the same goes down the line. So if it in the plug tray, if it does not develop, if it does, the roots fail, if it decides it wants to take a left-hand turn and just grow flat along the ground and it's an oak tree, I cannot make that into a saleable tree. And there's no reason for me as a nursery to actually save that plant unless it's some kind of endangered species that I've been asked to grow and they're going to take everything because of what it is. I would prefer to actually spend my time growing structurally sound plant material. Now you can see this one's got a little bit of a bend in it, but by the time that is about 1.5 inches, that bend is completely gone. You won't see it, and it'll be a very structurally and sound tree. Things that we look for when we are transplanting: vigorous growth, that fibrous root system that you see here, and that no defect thing that we were talking about. And I can't stress this enough. You can feel for the plants. We grow thousands, if not millions of them every year from seed. And we can only bring to production, say, between 30 and 60,000 in a given year. And that's not including perennials. If it's perennials, it'd be a lot more. But when you're doing that kind of production and you're growing thousands and thousands, there's going to be a lot that don't make that cut. And as a nursery person, you have to make a very calculated decision to not produce particular species if they are not going to round into form and be strong growing plants for people that are going to be consuming your product. Now, why does that make a difference? Well, this picture illustrates why we do use the growing system that we do and why we stress roots over shoots. So we're not really terribly concerned with how green it is or how impressive it might look if I'm just cramming fertilizer into it. On the again, I'm the one with the slots and weird circle looking things. That is the root maker pot. That is our production line. And the one on that doesn't have it, looks nice and smooth and everything like that, that is a standard pot. And that is the root system that was produced from 2 seedlings grown at the exact same time, the exact same way, but one went into our pot and one went into the standard smooth-sided pot. And you can see that the root, there's nothing wrong with the roots that are growing in the smooth side pot, but you can see they're not stratified and they're very concentrated at the bottom of the pot. Now, if you're planting something like that, for my money, I'm looking at the one on the right or left, the root maker pot, simply because I know that I'm going to have roots near the surface. I know I'm going to have roots near the bottom, and that the root system, that one right there is an animal. And you're trying to make sure that when you get it into the ground, that there's enough root tips and pardon me, that the root tips are active and stratified throughout the ball. That means that I'm going to have root contact with the soil much higher in the column, and that if air or water or anything like that becomes an issue, the plant is going to be able to adapt much quicker than it would otherwise. And this system is across the board for us. So what you see here from the standard pot with the smooth sides versus the one we use at every step in our production line. So we make sure that the root systems that are going out of there as is, we want them to be angry and ready to go. If you don't have an angry root system, your root in time takes a lot longer. Sometimes if it sits in the pot too long, you can see that the one that's a standard pot, the roots get very, very tight at the bottom, and they're very hard to get to correct. It takes a much longer period of time. And we don't want to see that. We want that thing to root out right away. And the more active growing tips that you have, the better your performance is overall going to be. Keep on hitting the wrong button. My apologies, everybody. Now, that was our 1 gallon production. And I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but you can see on the left with my, hand for some reason, those are the pints that go into our 1 and 5 gallons. And that oak, again, that's a bur oak. Yeah, that's a bur oak. And that one was, again, started in February. I took this picture in June. So we're looking for this really fantastic growth, because when we take it from this picture here and move it into this picture here, we expect that growth to continue. So when I'm producing my 1 gallon pots and I'm doing my oaks, and people kind of said they're, oh, seedlings are so hard to deal with. They take forever, this, that, no. If you do a step system and you are actively selecting out plants that are underperforming, and you're moving them up and you're encouraging their root growth without again, we do not use liquid fertilizer in any way. It's just in our soil mix. So there's no extra fertilizer added to the mix other than what's there. We just make sure that they're watered, happy, and getting as much sun as possible. And seedling plants like this oak will go into that 1 gallon pot on your right. It'll be 4 feet tall when it's ready, by the time our contracts are typically up with 1 gallon material. And this same product line for us goes from that pint into that 1 gallon and then into our 5 gallons. As you can see, again, with all the people standing around, they're standing around those oak trees, and you can see the root systems on them. And I guess there's something, sorry, I am rusty, so forgive me. There's a couple things that I did forget to mention. We don't use and have not used a fungicide, miticide, or pesticide other than Safer Soap on the property in 40 years. So what you're seeing on the left are active fungal growth that we get on the root systems of our plants. We don't know which ones they are. The mycorrhizae, this is the big thing in production right now, is inoculating your plants, getting their beneficial fungus on your roots by spending money on stuff that probably doesn't work. So what because you don't know which ones are good for what plant is what we've done. So we've stopped trying to figure that out. And we just because we don't use a fungicide, we let this happen. And we have roughly identified, because none of us are mycologists, but we've roughly identified about 6 or 8 that routinely show up on our woody plants. There's this one here on the left, there's we get these big white kind of weird growths. The plants themselves, it seemed to have no effect on them whatsoever. We do get mushroom growth out in the field. We don't know what they are. Doesn't bother us at all. The plants do not seem to respond to them in any negative way. And you can see that the root system that I was talking about, you can see how the small pints, they get rooted in very, very heavily toward the bottom, but they are rooting at the top. And if you look at the plants that are on the table in front of you, over by the lady who's showing off the guns there, you have, you can get a good view of the root system on those pints and how it is stratified all the way to the top. And it's a very important feature. And if you look very closely, we're actually selecting as we're planting. So even flats that we're okay with, we bring them all out And you can see at the top of the, I can't point, you can see at the top of the picture the ones that are going to be going into pots. But at the very bottom of that picture, you'll see a wheelbarrow full of, so it looks like soil and leaves. Those are the ones that did not make the cut as we were planting. So those, they go into the burn pile. And we just kind of move on with our lives. We do use, we're very mechanized. We use potting machines. So we can put down about 10,000 pots a day with about 6 people. And, make sure that, everything runs smoothly, and we get set up to grow as much as we can. The first couple of days, the pots are left naked, like you can see up in the top right there. So they settle in, we water the heck out of them. We make sure that the soil mix that's in there settles, so there's good soil contact. And then after that, we come by with what's, some of you might be familiar with a row mulcher. It looks like a big wagon with a hopper and an arm that sticks out the side, and we can adjust it and actually fill in the gaps with 2 people, and we can mulch that whole thing in an hour. So it cuts down on our time and makes our life a lot easier. Plus, now, since we're using a mix of overhead and drip irrigation, it cuts down on our watering needs significantly. So instead of having to water them, 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, we're only having to water about an hour at a time per zone. And in that zone, there'll be several thousand plants. There we go. From the 5 gallon, we moved to the 15 gallon. And what you see here, I know it looks like a mess, and I wish I had better pictures. I'm going to have film of it this year, is our 15 gallon production. The big white bag that you see there is actually what is replacing our field grown material. So we're no longer drilling holes in the earth and carrying on with eroding our native soil profile. We're actually putting these plants directly down on top of the soil and then mulching them in so that they can get good soil contact, and they can actually root in to the bottom. These are grounder pots. So if you hold it up, it's poke lots and lots of holes on the bottom so that the tree can actually root into the ground and feed itself on whatever we're not giving it. So we're trying to keep it kind of close to nature. The oak trees that you see them planting here were the previous year's 5 gallon material. So they'll be 1 year in a 5 gallon pot before they go into this system. And so not including the pot height, which doesn't change, by the way. So the 12 inches on the pot is the same as the 12 inches on the root bag that you see. So that plant's about 4.5 to 5 feet tall by the time we're moving them up into the next stage of our production. So any plant or tree that hasn't been made into a sale in that 5 gallon, we can actually recycle into our 15 gallon line if it's not already planned for. So when we do our production scheduling, we actually look ahead and say, okay, how many of this plant do we need? And that's what we plan for. But say somebody comes in and they buy us out on this happens to be bur oak again. They buy out all our bur oak. Well, I've got a lot of extra bur oak from 5 gallon that didn't sell. I can actually recycle those into this system so that I don't lose, the growing effort that I put into those plants initially. So it's a way of recycling. And again, we're selecting out, but it's a way of recycling material without losing the cost of production. And it's kind of very important. If any of you are ever going to go into nursery business, you're going to want to make sure that you don't lose the cost of production. So if you can recycle a plant like you're recycling a pot and grow it on for other uses and needs, you're going to be much more successful because you don't then lose that money, that capital investment that you put into it. And it gets real fun. Things have changed a little bit from these pictures. Actually, this past year, we've kind of upgraded the system. The standalone sprinkler, it has not changed. We still use duct tape like crazy. And we hose them down as much as we can, but the root systems that, again, that we're looking for are well stratified. And you can see that actually some of them are starting to form structural roots. What is it? I believe it's called the rule of two. My brain's kind of all over the place today. My apologies. But the what we're looking for is you only increase the pot size by 2 inches in every direction, or I guess that's the rule of 4, so that you're able to recapture the growing tips. So, and you don't get the halo effect in your pots. So when you're going from your pint to your 5 gallon, or your pint to your 1 gallon, or your 5 gallon to your 15 gallon, that it doesn't drastically increase the pot size, because the roots are going to make a beeline to the outside. They're looking for air, and they're going to make a beeline to the outside. And as soon as they hit that air, they're going to desiccate. And again, they're going to regrow from anywhere from 2 to 4 inches from that depth at the end of the root, so that you start getting that fibrous system. Excuse me. But if you have it too far, it becomes what's called the halo. You'll have a whole, you'll have initial root system about yay big, and then there'll be a big gap. And then the roots will form again around the outside. And once that occurs, then you have this hollow spot in your ball. And there's no way that the plant is going to recover that root growth and be able to store energy in that space until after it is planted for the customer. And you're not looking for that. You want to make sure that you're not submerging the root zone too deep in the pot, so you don't get girdling roots, you don't get plant roots that surface. This all goes into it. Now you can see in some we soak them before we put them in to try and reduce stress, especially on hot days. But you can see on some of them, they're already starting to form structural roots. And for what we do and the production that we've put out there and how long we've been watching some of the trees that we've had in this system, those structural roots stay. And once they are put out in nature, some of the ones that we've daylighted later on, there's no adverse effect, even up from the 5-gallon size. So we've been fairly pleased with that. We do get the occasional girdler. We recommend that the customer, if we don't catch it, if the customer does, just take your pruners and nip it so that you don't get any girdle on bark tissue. But that's maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20. And we try and catch that as early and as often as possible. And that's why, again, we're selecting out as we go along. If we find a bad one, out it goes. And here's kind of the end result. This you can see that the first the upper right is the Quercus macrocarpa, actually, that they were planting in that picture the winter after, and they are 5 to 7 foot tall at this point. So they'll actually continue growing in that 5-gallon pot for the rest of that year. So you don't get any gap in production of wood for that particular plant. And on your left, the pecan, just because, I grew up pecan, yay. But the one on the bottom is the one I want you to kind of take a look at. The one on the lower, again, I think it's right for you guys. It's the guy holding the crown of the tree. His hand is on the node for the year. So that growth from his right hand all the way to the tip is from a single season's worth of growing. And that one there is a Chinkapin oak. And that's fairly typical for a plant in this system in its second year. And its first year, you can see it puts on some caliper right above it. And then the second year, once it really starts to take off, as long as the growing year is a fairly good one, we see growth rates anywhere from 48 to 60 inches in most of our oak trees, without including shingle oak, white oak, and black oak. Everybody else will go berserk, but those three. And Kentucky coffee tree has a similar reaction. First year just kind of sits there. Next year we'll have growth rates on Kentucky coffee tree up to 5 feet. So it's not uncommon to see these kind of like whip-like expenditures of growth. And we're not overloading these pots with fertilizer or anything like that. They just I think it's the timing of it. As long as we get the timing right, the plant just keeps growing and never stops. Now, when we started Possibility Place Nursery, we were no different than any other mainline nursery. And again, when I was a kid, I used to walk behind that planter and make sure that the plants were upright. And it was a very, it was a charming childhood. But it's something that, we, as a family, we did. And it is something that we kind of, it became second nature to us. And as we grew, we realized that we weren't really doing it because it was just plants. We were having interactions with the natural world that we really appreciated more than I think some of the people that were actually purchasing from us. If you're planting street trees, most people are like, oh yeah, I got a tree. But being able to connect with it, sometimes you don't always get that kind of benefit. And we realized very early on, especially when we went all native, that it started to become a philosophy with us. It wasn't just the tree itself, it's what else it did and how it interacted with the local environment. And when we started kind of realizing that, we started offering consulting. Connor, myself, my brother, we started talking to people, at their homes, at the nursery, and we tried to get them to, rather than just plant some native landscape, whatever it is. I want a prairie, but you live in the woods, and being able to get them to plant more ecologically minded and to show them the benefit and the things that come with it in their natural environment. It became a family passion. And we want to see, especially groups like what you guys do, the use of natives is not just, it's not just because they're native. It's not something they're trendy. It actually speaks to the broader environment in which we live in Northeast Illinois. We're very rich here in biodiversity, and we're losing it quickly. And so being able to add it back into our local environments is very, very important to us as a company. And it's kind of hard for me to articulate competently, but when I go to work, I can just go outside and sit down under an oak tree and watch caterpillars munch away. Not everybody gets that kind of opportunity. So we want people to be able to enjoy that at home. And oh, that was a yellow-billed cuckoo, by the way. We don't want them to go out and see this. We strive very hard to, when developers or customers come in, that this is not an outcome that we're involved with. We want to see, oak trees in the parkway. We want to see something different than just what you see standard. We would rather see people be able to enjoy something like this more regularly and at home, maybe not quite so elaborate, but have that kind of natural interaction. And that is part of our, it's part of our core as a company. And we want to make sure that when we are selling our material, that we express that to our customers on every level. And running a native plant nursery is a little bit more than just growing the plants. You're actually, you're cold and calculated in your production, but when you're actually putting them out into the world, you want to see success, because once that success happens and the colors and everything like that come with it, people benefit significantly. And we try to make it as appealing and available to everyone that we can find. But it's challenging. When we're on the job, we're shoehorned. We, on the right, you can see a restoration job that we did a number of years ago. On the left, a school planting, they just crammed it right up against the building. In other places, natives are becoming a little bit more, mainstream. There's a golf course that I don't know if it still exists. And, here's a beach up in Evanston, and rain gardens that we put in with school children. and you have this opportunity to, to kind of showcase these things, but not everybody takes them home. And when you're planting a tree on the street and you're using these native trees, especially oak trees, as a way to reach out to communities and give people a little bit of ownership on that, we really work hard to make sure that any group that's coming in that is doing that kind of work, that we make the best trees that we can available to them so that they have success, and that frankly I don't get the phone calls that say my tree died, and I just hate to have that, frankly. But what we're up against is staggeringly heavy. There's apathy, in wild area care. You can kind of see there, but in the buckthorn grove, um, on the left, you would hope that, we'll call it a particular forest preserve district, would take a little bit more pride in their work and not spray their trees with grass seed. And when we go out and we're doing this kind of collection, and we're consulting on jobs, and we see this kind of thing, it really it worries us that as a company is like, is my material that I'm putting out here for their use going to be successful? And you'd hope so. But it also comes into what we're up against as far as what's available. Why we stress our roots, and the kinds of things that I'm sure you guys as tree keepers see all the time. That tree right there, we still haven't got down the root ball, or we haven't found the root flare yet. You can see there, I think we dug it down and it was about 12 inches. So you're seeing about 6 of it there. It took a long time for us to find that damn thing. But you can also see, where material comes in. Where is this stuff from? When we were partners with a outreach group that was having a plant sale, they turned down my material, which is fine, and they're right. But they're like, oh, we found this grower. But when we asked, okay, well, where'd that material come from? And they were like, oh, it came from Michigan or Missouri or from Kentucky. That's not truly native to our area. While the species may be, it is more and more critical that we find growers, like Woody Warehouse, like myself, like Majestic Oaks, that actually do our own collection and pride ourselves on bringing material that are native to the region in a more real way. We have, you're talking about plants that travel 5 miles from their home to the production, and 10 miles or 25 miles to where they're planted, instead of 1,500 miles, from where they were collected, and another 400 miles to where they're, eventually planted. We want to see people, embrace more local growers and utilize better, higher quality material. So you don't see this kind of thing anymore. And I don't care what people tell you, that picture of that root flare buried like that, or the fact that this tree got this big on the bottom right here, and it never really developed any structural roots at all, that is a very common outcome. We see it all the time, and our phone rings, they're like, my tree fell down, and then they send us a picture, and it's like, no kidding. And then I have to effectively talk them into utilizing higher quality material, and it's kind of frustrating. Oops. But it's also, like I said, native growers. What kind of work do you guys want to do? This is very big material, and all this stuff came in from Oregon. It's a challenging go. But then there's also the end use. Planting trees like that under power lines. Have you guys dealt with that yet? No. And then the standard use of things that are non-native in ways that they just don't live very long. So you don't have intuitive landscapes as part of our, common lexicon. And we want to make sure that when we are promoting natives, that each site is going to be a little bit different. So it's not cookie cutter. You're not going to, have that same plant in front of every home. You might have it in a neighborhood because your soil profile is right and they're all thriving. But as soon as you move over from like a light sandy soil to a heavy clay one, that palette, that group of plants that are appropriate for that are good. And then, or you have these like forgotten projects. This was a park district program where they were going to harvest these trees and give them to people that are live inside the park district's coverage area. Not one of those left the property. We counted, there were 250 trees in the ground. Every one of them was dead. So it's just like, if you're going to be doing that and you're going to be doing outreach, it would be better that it was followed through, where a lot of these native programs, they just kind of come up and then they just blow away. Here's a little food for thought. How am I doing on time? Am I okay?
It is about 10 to 7. So I think we're doing plenty good on time.
Okay.
I think in about 10 minutes we should take a break. And I was wondering, do you think it would make sense to answer the questions we've got so far?
I only have I think I only have 2 slides left. So
Okay,
if we hit this up, and then we can go take a break and come back for question and answer. Would that be good?
That sounds great.
All right. This is food for thought. The 15-gallon bags that we put out, the plant size ranges from inch to 2 inch, and sometimes 2.5, depends on the species. Sycamores they're animals and they grow very, very quickly. So their caliper can go pretty big, pretty fast. But the average weight, even on our 2-inch material coming out of our 15-gallon pot, weighs about 55 to 60 pounds. So that's handleable by most homeowners can handle that. The 2-inch material that you see here in this picture, as you can see from this graph, that weighs more than 400 pounds. There's no homeowner, you'd have to be built like a truck and chew iron as a hobby to be able to put that in all by yourself. And it can be very, very challenging. And so when you're doing these kinds of street tree plantings, I know you guys do a lot of volunteer work. So 5-gallon and 15-gallon, are something that you're routinely familiar with. But being able to put something like this in, where this is the industry standard at 2-inch, it takes it out of the realm of the common man. So you're not talking about something that everyone can handle. It took these particular plants. I know where they went, and I watched them. They had to use a backhoe to lift them off there, and I don't have a backhoe at home. It's not something that everybody is going to be able to handle. And so making sure that people have access to this material, we've tried to gear our nursery in a way that puts it available to everyone, that every single person that comes through our door can handle planting. I always tell people, if you've never seen a shovel before, you can plant one of our trees in 20 minutes. If you have seen a shovel before, you can still do it in 20 minutes and have a beer. So it's just something that, is not troublesome for people. And I feel that the nursery industry as a whole has kind of stepped away from embracing everybody, and they wants to do it on their own. It's very, very challenging. Keep wrong button again. There you go. And did I hit the 60-minute mark? Not quite.
Just shy, but that's totally fine. I'll tell you what, we do have a list of questions here. Why don't we let's take a 5-minute break, everybody. And fill up your water glass, do whatever you need. And in 5 minutes, we'll come back. We'll get through some questions, maybe have some good discussion here. And a reminder to those of you, especially if you didn't sign on until late, we are recording this. And so we'll be able to share that out. We don't have any links yet, but we'll see if we do get any links. I will go through the chat and snag those and compile those. So let's take a 5-minute break. I've got 6:53.
So you're
And
telling me that people can watch this later on and be disappointed?
no, I highly doubt they'll be disappointed. So I've got 6:50, 6:54. So let's say 7 o'clock. Back in our seats, or however you are watching this, and we'll get through some questions. Hopefully, have some good discussion and wrap this up. So thanks everybody.
Uh, oh. Hey, Al, you there?
Yes.
If I call out the individual people, would they unmute themselves so I can answer the questions? Would that be
Yeah,
okay?
why don't we do that? I was gonna kind of ask the questions, but I think we'll, I think if you're looking at the chat list, if we
Yeah, I'm
just
looking at
start
the chat list.
great.
Is
Happy to, I do like to give people credit, so yeah, you could just, kind of call them
no,
out.
I'll call. I can call it out. Yeah, there's no worries at all. I don't mind at all.
Great.
I see Jenny's the first one here. So yeah. So yeah, what your question? What was your question, Jenny?
Well, I'll have to scroll back up and see what did I ask, because,
Okay.
that was an hour ago.
It was an hour ago. Oh, it was.
Well, almost.
No, it says what here? It says, what made you choose native plants?
Oh, okay, that's my first question.
Oh,
Sure.
no. Frankly, when we found a hole in the market, and it was 1978 when we started this, and we actually started growing natives almost from the beginning. And most of it was because we were dirt poor and we didn't have enough money to buy in a lot of liner stock. So what we did was we started growing, especially the oak trees, because the oaks that we got in one year were garbage. They were just terrible. And my father had the bright idea that he could just employ my brother and I to go pick up acorns. And so we started kind of innocuously, really, using natives. I mean, we're always kind of an outdoor family. So it was one of those things that natives kind of made sense to us already. And when we started growing them and we saw how everything was the same, that was the one thing we did notice, that when we grew natives from seed, all the seedlings were the same. So when we were able to produce them and make them available to people, initially it was just to make money. And we started our first big contracts were with the city of Village of Riverside. So if you see any oaks, you'll see oaks in the 18-inch range in Riverside. That's all from us. And when we started doing that kind of work, we just know, it's just started becoming easier and easier. And so we just expanded from there. And then later on, we kind of realized it's like, hey, we really like this. To hell with all this non-native garbage. Pardon for those with sensitive ears, but we said, nuts to this stuff, and we got rid of it all. When I went to school, I studied plants, and when I came back, it was one of the conditions that I set, and of course nobody listens to their kids, so it was just one of those things where I'm like, I'm not working for a company that's selling non-native material. And that in 1999, we went all completely native. Every non-native species, even ones that have been hanging around because they will call them native adjacent species. Now we do grow things out of zone. So we have some magnolia and stuff like that are native here, but they're hardy. But they serve an ecologic purpose. And we found that there was a drastic need. And other than, home nursery and maybe the natural garden and one other, that we were it. There were no other just pure native growers. Now there's more and more and more of them, especially in the herbaceous area. But we really, it started to become more of a passion project where we liked the oak trees. We liked hackberry. We liked these things and we enjoyed collecting it, and just started rolling on us. Now, if I can only get my kids to interact with it, it'd be great. So do you have any other questions?
I do.
Okay.
You did talk a little bit about the growing medium used for seeds, and that you've got fertilizer in that.
Yes, a slow release Osmocote.
Okay, so later on, is there ever a need to fertilize native plants? I mean, once they're in the ground.
No. Yes, no. Once they're in the ground, no. And this is for everybody. I know I'm only looking at names and a couple of pictures of very handsome people. Hello. But no, don't ever liquid fertilize ever. Don't use things that you don't have to. You do not want to over exacerbate a problem in a tree by throwing too much fertilizer at it. What we have found is that usually there's nothing wrong with your soil, especially if you kind of kept up on the soil science of it all, and you've kept it live. And so have you had anybody, Al, have you had anybody come in and talk about mycorrhizal fungi and stuff like that?
Yeah, we have for the tree keepers course anyway. We have Melissa from Morton.
Okay.
Go into that. Yeah.
And I can't stress this enough. Uh, you want to keep your soil live, so no fungicides and no miticides. You're looking for that live aspect in your soil. If you want to help your plants out, you're actually better off, especially if you're on clay, taking granular sulfur sulfur. You want and because you're trying to create a mild sulfuric acid to help break up. I don't know if you know how soil is put together, but especially in clay, it looks like Necco wafers under a microscope. And you're trying to break the covalent bonds between them where they hide a lot of the nutrient. So once you throw that sulfur down, it helps break up that covalent bonding and it releases nutrient out into the soil. And that is going to be far more beneficial than throwing down, a heavy duty fertilizer for no particular reason, especially since the ones that are commercially available are so high in your P and K. Really, you might need a little nitrogen every now and then, might need some iron, you might need to do something like that. But if you start throwing down heavy P and K, you're just going to get nothing but runoff and disasters down system from you. So, adding organic matter every other year to your beds, raking your leaves in there, the more natural the process, the more healthy your soil will be.
Okay, great.
And I'll tell you what, Cassie, since it's on topic, I will jump in with Cassie's question. She said, did you mention something about using cedar in your potting system?
Cedar in the flats. So the flat itself, the square, the wood square that holds the soil together, it retards root growth. Cedar will retard root growth. So that's why you don't want to use it as mulch, everybody. No cedar, no cypress, no dyes. Okay? Cedar retards root growth. Cypress, why on earth would you want to cut down a 1,000-year-old tree to make little tiny bits? And dyes actually don't decompose properly. So when you actually throw them out into nature, it's kind of like you might as well have taken pieces of asphalt and mulched with that. So you'd be much better off. But the reason why we use cedar is it doesn't warp when it's wet. So when we put our flats together, and the roots will hit that, and they don't like it, and they go down. So it's like a natural root retardant that we utilize, and it also makes the flats last longer. So we're cheap, So that's Cassie. Is that Avies? Am I saying that right? Who asked that question?
Oh, that was Cassie, sorry, who certified arborist with working with the park district.
No, I'm missing her. Oh, over here. Got her with the dog or something on her back, right? Got it. Who's next here? Blueberries. Where's Steph? She go away?
I'm here.
All right. Blueberries that we can eat? Yes. Yeah, you can eat them. It makes it harder to get the seed though. So if you're
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's actually there are 4 native blueberry species to this part of Lake Michigan. You're going to find them much more regularly up in Lake Bluff. You can find them on the ravines, and Illinois Beach. I believe there's still some. You can find some there. But the easiest place is to go on the hike at Cowles Bog. Have you been over there yet? No. So if you go to Cowles Bog, now that it's a national park, parking is harder than it used to be. And right along that trail, there's the native one, the most common one is Vaccinium angustifolium, and it's early low blueberry. Really beautiful fall color. The fruit's a little on the small side, but if you're really looking for that blueberry flavor, it's amazing. And you can grow them in pots as long as you only have it for eastern exposure. So like if you have a planter or something, it responds very, very well as long as you put it in a sandy soil planter. So you have to mirror the soil type and give it a little bit of shade. So it doesn't, no exposure. So no exposure to sun, like say after 10 o'clock, as long as it's filtered. So if you're going to grow it at home, if you don't have a yard, Or even if you just want it as a pet, still works great. You have more?
Oh, just gonna ask, the picture you showed was a picture of the seeds, and I was curious if that's,
Yeah.
if those were seeds. I'm curious why they're all like different shapes and sizes and colors.
You know what? We actually, when we put them under the microscope for the first time, it kind of blew our mind a little bit because you see all the pot marks and how they're all like divoted and everything like that. We had no idea because when you're looking at it in person, it just looks like a little smooth kind of, I don't know, like carrot seed almost. But as soon as we threw it under the microscope, we found that the ones that were more purple and had rounded edges, they germinate. All the other ones, like the one that was red, and then there was a stick in there. Sorry, I was sloppy. But the ones that were like had more angular shape, they didn't germinate. So we're looking. We wanted to see how many rounded edge and ones that were more purplish and bluish in color, or maybe a little bit more gray, to make sure that the seed is good. Because it's very difficult to cut one of those in half and actually see the germ inside. So so we're just looking for the shape of the seed when we do that. And once we find that out, we know that that seed's going to germinate. And when they do germinate, you saw the picture of the hydrangea, how small those were. The blueberry seedlings are smaller. So we actually have to grow that flat for almost 2 years before we can actually transplant them out. That's why they're more
Wow.
expensive. But the early low blueberry, it's a glorious plant, and the more sun it gets, the more vivid red the fall color is. So it's a really spectacular plant. You have more on that one, or are you good?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
This workshop has been great. So thanks to you and Alan Openlands.
Yeah, no worries. I'm glad you guys are okay with the Rusty Devil. What do we got here? Let's see. Jenny, we already talked, right?
Yeah, but I've got more questions, but
Yeah, more.
you can do other people first.
I got to do other
That's fine.
people first here. Let's see. Casey, so how deep is your germination tray? Is that you? Okay. What's the nuance of the question here?
So can you hear me okay? I don't know if my headset is dying. Okay. My two questions are actually just very technical because I'm weird like that, but the depth of the germination tray that you were working with, and is there anything in between the soil and the hardware cloth underneath?
You know, I forgot to mention that. We use, we like the Sun Times. The paper is the right size, one, and two, it tends to age well. So when the water's hitting it and everything like that, it ages so that the soil just doesn't fall out the bottom. And once it's wet, the roots actually penetrate it very, very well. So the sometimes the Tribune uses a heavier paper, so it's harder. It can dry out more. So there's that. And the tray itself, the soil will be about between 2 and 3 inches deep.
Okay.
And it depends on the species. So like the oaks, since they rest on top, it's going to be deeper soil. And where some of
Okay.
them we throw dirt over the top and they're going to germinate lower in the profile. So
Okay.
it really, the main thing that we're trying to get is get that root tip to penetrate down through through the paper. There we go. And so the tip will die and then it'll start growing back up here.
Yeah.
It disappeared into my own picture. Sorry about that.
Do you have to weight the seeds or do any special stratifications with them when you're doing your germinations?
Special stratifications, no.
Okay.
But there are cycles. There's some that we just throw in a fridge because we can just scatter it in the spring. A majority of, especially of the woody species, that they go into that flat before Thanksgiving, and then they just we stack them up. So it looks like, it's like building with Legos, only, the flats are 24 inches long by about 14 inches wide. And we just stack them high, and then we roll them into a chill house that we don't use refrigeration. We just use a blower to blow in cold air from winter. And we let that natural freeze thaw happen. And then we bring them out in the spring. And that's most of our woody species. Things like hackberry, Kentucky coffee tree are different because things like Kentucky coffee tree, for example, you actually have to take a metal grinder and actually touch it. Otherwise, the seed coat can remain intact for a decade or more. So it actually won't germinate. It smells like
Why-
dead hair too.
Why is that? Like, why do we need grinders in order to stratify
Oh, it's
seeds? Like,
easy.
are they just expecting that animals would have done that, or
Kind
somebody
of,
would have?
but the
Okay.
animal that did it for Kentucky Coffee Tree and for Osage Orange and a handful of others, they no longer exist. So
Got it.
in other words, they're a botanic anachronism. You can use that. And so they expected to pass through the gut of a massive animal.
Ah, gotcha.
And
Okay.
and that's why, and it's also why a lot of big trees that you see sucker a lot, like Kentucky Coffee Tree, like Black Oak, and a handful of others. If you knock them down, they come up everywhere. Persimmon is another one. They think an elephant is kicking the crap out of them, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, and up comes the growth. Persimmon, sassafras, all of these react because they were heavily eaten, and that's what they do. And some of the seed is the same way. So when I've heard people, oh, you just got to soak it for a month. Yeah, if you want to grow it next year, you have to treat some of these seed properly. That answer your question? Did I lose her? She's frozen.
Yeah, I don't know if she froze up, but I think you got it. Yeah, and we actually had an article in the newsletter. Oh, there's Casey. She like she got kicked out. Just let her back in. Yep. Casey, as soon as you're back with us, you can let us know if we got all that covered for you.
Hi, I don't know what happened there. Okay. That was weird. But I am back, and I was able to catch up at least enough with what Kelsey was saying. Thank you,
Okay.
Kelsey. The only last question that I had was when you were laying down the mulch over the pots that were out in the field, you
Yep.
are just mulching all the way up to the top layer of 12 inches and leaving them in a pot.
Yep. And again,
Okay.
everything, all the pots that we use in the field are grounder pots. So the roots have the opportunity to penetrate down into the soil. And
Is it like an aged hardwood, or are you just using fresh wood chip for that for insulation?
fresh wood chips by the spring of the following year, they are no longer fresh.
Yeah.
But it also helps in the first year to insulate the roots against any hard freezes. So any little bit of extra heat will actually keep them from getting hit too hard, and it helps us with their overall growth, in the long run.
Okay, cool. Thank
Okay?
you for answering my weird technical questions. I really appreciate it. It's
absolutely.
been great.
I don't get to geek out very often. Most times it's like, no, sir, we don't carry pear trees, So I appreciate this.
No,
Let's
we
see.
appreciate what you're doing.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions are good, and no need to apologize. You never know where it'll take conversation and discussion. So I'm all for questions, technical or otherwise. So let's
Actually,
see,
you
where
had
are
one
we
other
now?
one here that I wanted to touch on. Were you the one that asked about the evils of burying it in root or in mulch? Who asked that one? Somebody said evil and I caught it.
It wasn't me, but somebody did.
Oh, that was
Mary, there we
Marianne
go.
O'Toole asked, any suggestions on ending the evil of buried root flares?
And she's
Um,
gone.
she's,
She disappeared again. I'll wait till she gets back. Let's see here.
I think she had to move on, but I can share her answer with you. I'm in touch with
Okay.
Marianne. She's one of our very dedicated and passionate tree keepers in Arlington Heights. And she's one of the tree keepers who constantly finds trees buried too deep
It's not hard.
buried with the burlap and inches and inches the root flare buried inches and inches deep. So
Oh yeah, no worries. The biggest issue that we have found is that, and it's we put this in our planting instructions to everybody that calls in or buys material from us, that when you measure the ball for your hole, you always measure it with subtraction involved. So if you measure it for 12 inches, it should be at least 11. And you'd be surprised when I send people home with material, I go, all right, now you want to make sure that this is at least an inch shallow. So if you think the ball, or you think your hole needs to be 12 inches, it needs to be, and I'll point at the customer for the answer, and they'll look at me and every time, 13? It's like, that's not how subtraction works. You want to make sure it's shallow, so it sticks out of the ground an inch. Now, if you're not daylighting or you can't find the root flare, for anybody that's going to be planting that large ass stuff, I recommend getting a 12-inch piece of rebar and putting a nice handle on it, something you can hit with a hammer, and you just go up next to the root ball and you push down until you find something to contact, and that'll give you a general idea about how deep that root flare is into the ball before you dig the hole to put it in the ground. Now, and so unless you're going to shave the ball down, which can be problematic in its own right if you do it before you get it in the hole, because if you do it before you get it in the hole, a lot of, especially the B&B material, will fall apart before you get it in. So you want to make sure that you know where that root flare is. So it's like, you know what? The root flare is down 8 inches. So this ball's 2 feet deep. We need to make sure that this ball, the hole is only 16 inches so that we can daylight this, this root flare. And, and you do that to make sure that you can, come as close as possible to it. Now, once that ball's in there, it's in there. So you have to make sure that you're fairly sure and a studied hand at it before you just start doing that. But it's an easy tool to make, and it works very, very well. For our material, since it's flat bottom and it's super light, you can just pick it up out of the hole and redig. But it's something that anybody can do, and you want to make sure that it sticks out an inch. Now, you want to make, here's the thing about girdling roots too. When you have a girdling root and it goes across root tissue, so if it sneaks over a root tissue and it is root tissue, don't worry about it. It ain't a thing. If it goes over trunk tissue or anything above ground, that's when you want to make sure you nip it. If it's on root tissue, it'll just graft to itself. 900 times, 900 times, that doesn't make sense. But 99 times out of 100, that doesn't create any kind of instability in the ball. And usually you're only seeing that instability form, especially in species like pear, because for whatever reason, because that's all grafted material, their own roots don't like each other. And so when they start hitting each other, they actually create weak spots. But if you have an oak, and even if with a different species of oak, when their roots touch, they just graft. This is what they do. So they'll actually have a shared root system that'll just grow on, and you don't have any worry about it. You just have to make sure that it stays off trunk tissue or flare tissue. So like you want to make sure that if it's sneaking up over the top of the root flare, you nip those. But if it's lower, it's not a real problem. Not really. Unless, again, if it's a non-native species on grafted material. I'm hoping that answered her question. Angela doesn't like plants under high voltage lines. And let's see here. I saw one other one. No, I didn't. Anybody else have any questions before we run off? Nothing from you, Mr. Anderson? I'm surprised.
Jeannie did have a couple others. So
Oh, yeah,
Jeannie,
more?
should I
All
just
right,
let
fire
you ask
away.
them?
Right. So if I know that there are trees or shrubs that I want to buy from you
Mhm.
this spring, when would I order them so that I'm,
Anytime you want.
okay.
Yeah.
So just
As long as
call
they're-
and,
As long as they're in stock, and the order exists, it's all you.
okay, okay.
We have one price for everybody. So it's not, again, we try and make my company, and this is not something, I didn't really want, I'm not tooting my own horn here, but we try and make sure that whoever that customer is, they are equally as important if you're buying 500 or one. So if it's a tree, especially for trees, because we want to make sure that every tree that we put out the door is going to be the same. It's not going to be the same genetically. It's not going to be the same in form. We just want to make sure that the tree that you take home is no better or worse than the tree that Open Lands itself took home, or the city of Cedar Rapids, or anybody else from anywhere in the region. we want to make sure that, you know, it's as good as anything that I would put on the road.
Okay, and I did buy a pecan tree from you October
Is it
31st, so I
going
know
okay?
where you are.
Yeah.
It's doing great.
You know,
The other question I have, I work for a nonprofit and we recently got a grant to do some tree planting in East Central Illinois. And is there somebody like you?
like by
That's-
Coles
that's-
County or Champaign County, or where are we talking?
You know what? I don't know what East Central Illinois is.
East Central Illinois is like Champaign to Mattoon.
Okay, so yes,
Okay.
that. So is there somebody like you in that area, or are you the closest thing to?
It's me and the other one. You can reach out to Pete at Woody Warehouse, but that's way over by Indianapolis.
Okay,
Okay, and
Okay.
they're gonna have they're more of a, they do grow a lot of native material. Our sources are closer than their sources to that particular area. However, yeah, I mean, I wish that they would produce better small gallon material. Now, I like their larger, they're 10 and 15 gallons. That's as good as anybody I've ever seen. It's just they use that slotted pot and makes it kind of light. Otherwise, it's quality stuff.
okay. And I have recommended that the people that are involved in this project that we've got, that they sign up for the March Tree Keepers class. So,
And any training that they can get down there would be, I mean, when I went to school down in Coles County, both at Eastern Illinois and at the U of I, and there's a fervor for it, but there's no supply. So being able to find a grower that you can rely on to get it there, be it us or Woody Warehouse or somebody, is, you know, make sure that that material is up to snuff for what you're trying to do. I believe Woody's going to, I think they put out a 2 or 3 gallon and we do a 5. So the root mass is going to be bigger on ours, but they're going to have, it's going to be lighter from them.
okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Nobody? Oh,
Let me
fine.
take a look. I think, you know what? Let me take a quick look through the chat. And you know what? Selma, you want to ask your question?
Oh, what do you got?
Thanks,
Sal?
Al. Hey, really quickly. So I know you said that your dad quote unquote, recruited you to work in the nursery, but what's kept you interested in continuing to do the work for this long?
The honest answer is, you know, you is a grower, especially as a native plant grower, the industry kind of looks at you like you have 3 heads, and you kind of get this weird chip on your shoulder where, you know, you become more of a crusader than, you know, just, you know, out and out business person. And so, you know, and when you grow natives and you're involved with natives, it's not so much that it's not just the job. You want to make sure that you spread the infection, I guess. You know, for the love of the natural world, that you know, that you can show that there are benefits that go beyond what people would normally, you know, embrace as a tree. You know, I live in a neighborhood, there's a lot of ancient oaks and they're starting to time out. They're starting to die. I'm planting them in my yard and my neighbors think I'm a crazy person. So it kind of drives me, because I want to make sure that they can see the development, that the beauty and elegance of our native materials that grow here and contribute to a broader biodiversity is very, very important to me. And so it is a money-making endeavor. It's a job like no other. You know, you're going to be working in weird ways with weird people, and that's the fun part. And when you're able to engage that broader audience, it's fun. Even the bad phone calls, they're fun. You have an opportunity to do more than just sell trees. You have this opportunity to reach out and show people the beauty of the world that they may not be aware of, and it's kind of nice. I hope I really don't know if I have a good enough vocabulary to kind of articulate that for you, Selma.
That answered it. I appreciate it.
No worries. It's a different kind of. I will tell you this: anybody here that is, can still hear me. It is a different kind of work. When you are dealing with native plants, not only are you see yourself as a bit of a crusader for, saving the world, but you have a love that you will share with people that goes beyond your door, and it makes your life more interesting. And we found that as a company, we're trying to make money. We're trying to make it easier for us to make a living and be happy and, all that kind of stuff, so we can have more things. But really, my brother and I were talking about this the other day. It's the mission of what we do, and it's important to us. And we embrace those that do the same thing. Woody Warehouse in Indiana, Majestic Oaks, and even though we don't talk to these people at all, they're our rivals, but we respect what they do, and we believe that anybody that contributes to this community, as far, we talk to people in Iowa and Nebraska and Ohio and Pennsylvania, it opens up connections that you wouldn't normally, get to have. I mean, I get to speak to you tonight. I encourage all of you, by the way, Doug Ptolemy is going to be speaking on the 27th for the CalSag Nature Group. They just formed, and he's going to be their first speaker. I'm going to be their second speaker, just saying. But you get to interact with people that bring in viewpoints from all over the world, and it's fun as hell. It really is. I can't say more. Anybody else before I go?
Great. I'll tell you what, before you head off, everybody, let's give Kelsey a virtual round of applause. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers, everybody.
Man. And thanks again for taking the time, everybody. I will share out the presentation. I'll drop it in the Google folder. And if anybody's got any last questions, let's hear them. And thanks for taking the time, everybody. Be safe out there. Happy New Year. And we'll see you all soon. And check out our website, our service for other upcoming events we've got.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Kelsey.
All right.
No
Thanks.
worries. Hey, Al.
Have a good one, Kelsey.
Yeah. Before you go, Al.
Yes.
Ptolemy is going to be speaking for the CalSag people. It would be a good opportunity because he's going to be talking about the at-home national park.
Yeah, you know what? Can you send me some information on that? I'd love to share that out.
Yeah, and anybody that's still listening to us right now, the at-home national park is on Doug Ptolemy's webpage at the university. He's out of the University of Delaware. Anybody that hasn't read his book, by all means, go out and grab it. Even the one with Richard Dark with all the pictures. It's good work, and it'll help illuminate a couple of things for anybody that's interested. All right.
Great. And if I need to, is Durs knowledgeable with that stuff?
Yes, should be.
Okay, cool. I can ask him if I need to. Great. Right on.
Be
cool.
good, buddy. Have a nice one,
awesome.
everybody.
All right. Have a good one. And Nick, is that Nick Peterson?